Hey, what's up? My name is Jaredon Conde and you are watching Tito Fit. In this channel, we talk about health, fitness, we review some gear, sometimes we review gyms, sometimes we talk about random fitness stuff. Now, in this video, I am going to talk about Hyrox versus CrossFit. For the purposes of this video, let's use CrossFit as the CrossFit Games or the sport of CrossFit. So the sport of CrossFit or competing in CrossFit is very different from doing CrossFit for fitness. When it comes to doing CrossFit for fitness, even your grandmother can do it. If you have certain injuries, you can do it. Now, competing in the sport of CrossFit, maybe not. Let's start with the differences between the two. Hyrox was founded in 2017 in Germany, if I'm not mistaken. It positions itself as the sport of fitness racing. I recently did my first Hyrox from a month prior, which is why I'm making this video, because I've gotten a few questions. I've been asked what the difference is. Can you train CrossFit and do Hyrox, and vice versa? Is Hyrox CrossFit? I've been asked those questions, so I decided to make a video. The sport of fitness racing, that's Hyrox. On the other hand, we have CrossFit Games, which wants to find the fittest man and woman on earth. Hyrox is a mass participation event. The last Hyrox I did in Singapore, it was the first Hyrox in Singapore, and I think the second in Asia in general. There were 3,500 registrants as far as I understand. Now, as far as the CrossFit Games is concerned, it's a very, very elite club. It's kind of like the NBA, think of it like that. So if you tell me like, hey, you know what, I'm gonna compete in the CrossFit Games. Me being who I am at this age, I'm not gonna correct you. I'm not gonna say you have no hope, but that's actually what I think, okay? That's like telling me you picked up a basketball yesterday and you're gonna play in the NBA 10 years from now if you're 10 years old. It's probably not gonna happen. You're 5'6", bro. Good luck with that. Alright? So CrossFit Games is the same. It's the 0.1%. So 99.99% of all the CrossFitters on earth will never make it to the CrossFit Games. I live in the Philippines. For now, we have only had 2 athletes make it to the CrossFit Games ever. Both friends of mine, you know, Justin and Kristen, and that was the year that they allowed a different format of qualifying for the CrossFit Games. If you were number 1 in your country, you automatically made the CrossFit Games. I don't see that happening anymore since they brought the format back to open, quarterfinal, semifinal, and then make it to the CrossFit Games. It's a highly selective process. People like us, we can join the open, but as far as I understand, in the last couple of years, even the best scores in most of Asia have not been good enough to even be competitive with the top scores in North America and Europe. That's not being racist, it's just facts. We had 1 Asian qualify this year's CrossFit Games, that's Ann Haynes. He did well actually, but that's 1 in a couple of million, right? But that doesn't mean you can't compete in the sport of CrossFit. There are local competitions and, you know, competitions in Asia, competitions in Europe. Wherever you're from, there are competitions. So that's what a lot of people can aspire to joining and participating in as far as CrossFit as a sport is concerned. Just this year here in the Philippines, there were at least 5 major competitions, and they were attended by hundreds of athletes at the same time. You know, I even joined a few of them. Hyrox is a set format. It's divided into 8 1-kilometer runs, followed by a station wherein you have to do specific work. Specific work being, the first one is 1,000 meters on the ski erg. Second one is a sled push. Depending on your division, the weight would be different. The second one is a sled pull. I think they're both 50 meters sled push and sled pull. Followed by the 4th one would be, after that, the next station after your 1K run will be a 1,000 meter row on the Concept 2 rower, followed by kettlebell farmer's carry, again given a specific distance, and then the last 2 would be your sandbag lunges, again depending on what category you're joining, the weight would be different, and then the last finished by 100 wall balls or 75, I think, depending on what category. Again, it doesn't change. The format will always be the same, whether you're joining Hyrox in Singapore, Hyrox in Hong Kong, Hyrox in Europe, Hyrox in the US, or Hyrox in the Middle East. It will always be the same format. And it has that going for it, because the more you join Hyrox, the better you get at it. Now, CrossFit, on the other hand, depending on what competition you join, the events will always be programmed different. There are one-day competitions, There are 2-day competitions, and then there are 3-day competitions. Sometimes a 1-day competition may have 3 events, a 2-day competition may have 4 or 5 events, and then you have the 3-day competitions having maybe 7 all the way up to 9 events. So it's very different. And the events or the tests are always different depending on the competition. Let's use the CrossFit Games. The CrossFit Games this year's events are all different from the previous iterations of the CrossFit Games. So 2023 CrossFit Games, the events were completely different from 2022 CrossFit Games. And that was different from the 2021 CrossFit Games. Now you may have one event as a repeat or like as a throwback just because there's some high demand for it. Generally speaking, they're always different. There's a bit of a randomness to a CrossFit competition because at the end of the day, CrossFit does package itself as you being able to train for the unknown and the unknowable. This video is not meant to knock on either CrossFit or Hyrox. I'm just comparing the two from the perspective of someone who has done CrossFit, coached CrossFit, competed in CrossFit extensively versus someone who's done Hyrox once. Okay, I've done Hyrox once, but I feel like if you check out our previous video, I'll probably be doing it again. The type of fitness demanded for Hyrox, I would say it demands a lot of cardio. It's more of an endurance sport. That's 8 kilometers worth of running, and then of course in between that all of that running, there's a lot of other things that you had to do. So it's mostly cardio. I'd say it's 70-80% cardio. You have to have a high level of cardiovascular fitness if you want to do well in Hyrox, if you want to eventually join the pro divisions. Of course, you can build the strength required to do the stations, most notably the sled push and the sled pull. Those are the ones that demand the most strength. Cardio or endurance is a little bit easier to build than it is to build strength. It takes years and years to have a high level of strength, whereas cardio, if you are running regularly and you're following a nice program, you're able to increase your aerobic capacity, you're doing your mileage when it comes to running, you're gonna do fine with your cardio. When it comes to CrossFit, the number one hierarchy for you to be able to compete in the sport of CrossFit is skill, because you're gonna have to be able to unlock certain movements before you join a competition. You're gonna be able to have to do them at a high volume, so that's next. Your work capacity. So after your skill, your capacity is next. To do these movements at a high volume before you fatigue. Of course, strength is also involved, a lot of strength, but I think the peak of that is your skill, because without your skill for gymnastics-based skills like your toes to bar, your muscle-ups, your high volume pull-ups, handstand push-ups, handstand walking, things like that, you're not gonna be able to compete in CrossFit. Not to mention your Olympic weightlifting skills like your clean and jerk, your snatch. Those lifts are gonna have to be at a decent level before you're able to compete. And then work capacity, of course, that's gonna determine how well you place in the competition. That being said, I'd say that if you've never done a Hyrox, if you've never participated in a Hyrox and you decide to, you can get ready for one in 3 months. Whereas if you've never done CrossFit, you can't compete in 3 months. Not unless if you're able to do that, you're an outlier. You're probably part of that 0.1% I mentioned earlier. You probably belong in the upper echelons of the sport. I mean, given that if you've been doing it for 3 months and then you win a local competition, that's talent right there. You should be scouted or something. So those are the differences as far as the types of fitness that each of those competitions or type of competitions would require. Next, let's talk about the cost of entry. I don't mean like just the money, but because both of them do involve money. Let's talk about the cost when it comes to your life. For Hyrox, you don't need too much specialized equipment. So let's talk about training for it first. You can run anywhere. That's cheap. The only specialized equipment you'll be using are sleds, a rower, and a ski erg. So if your gym has those, some kettlebells, you're good. You'll be able to train for Hyrox properly. Not much specialized equipment necessary. Not even much specialized coaching. On the other hand, talking about CrossFit, you're gonna need a lot of specialized equipment. An Olympic barbell, Olympic bumper plates to train, you're gonna need gymnastic rings, and then second, you're gonna need coaching to help you become competent at those. You can, study them on your own. It's just that a good coach can shortcut a lot of these things and make you more efficient at doing these skills. So that as far as training facilities, CrossFit is much more specialized. Hyrox would be less specialized, if that makes sense. So that being said, the cost of entry for training for both, CrossFit would be a little bit more prohibitive, whereas Hyrox would be a little bit more inclusive. Next, let's talk about a lifestyle necessary. If you're going to compete in a local CrossFit competition and you're going to be lifting a lot of heavy stuff, that's going to take a toll on you. You're probably going to have to train for 2 hours in general per day at a higher volume. That being said, you're going to have to sacrifice some things. You're going to have to sleep early and sleep long. Can't go Netflix and chill too much. You can't be drinking every few nights. You can't be throwing down beers if you're competing in CrossFit. Whereas if you're competing in Hyrox, as long as you're doing your mileage, there are no high skill movements in Hyrox, so your risk of getting injured is very low. That being said, it's not an excuse for you to be throwing down a couple of bottles of beer every few nights. Of course, that's not going to help your cause either. It's not going to help you perform better. But if you have a drink every now and then, like maybe once a week, 1 or 2 drinks, I don't see that as being detrimental to your prep for Hyrox. Whereas it would be detrimental to your prep for a CrossFit competition, because it may impair your recovery. As far as nutrition goes, nutrition for Hyrox, you'd probably be needing a lot of carbs for endurance events. Whereas for CrossFit, you'd also be needing a lot of carbs, but you'd have to be more mindful of your protein intake because you need to repair a lot of those muscle tissues that you damaged from all that training, from all that heavy lifting. In Hyrox, you still need a lot of protein, but not as much as you would need for CrossFit. Now, let's talk about the financial costs. CrossFit, you have local competitions going around, so you could probably compete wherever you are. The cost of entry for registration, about $50 US or about 3,000 pesos, all the way to about maybe 10,000 pesos or about $200. In Hyrox, you register for a competition, it's going to be an average about $150, maybe a little less. So it's probably about 7,500 pesos, 8,000 pesos, something like that. I competed in Singapore. I'm not so sure about the cost in Europe or in the US, but in Singapore, it was roughly thereabouts. Depending on what division you joined, there were minimal differences in the cost. Of course, if you compete locally, you're already there. You may need to book a hotel depending on how far your competition is, just so that you're more comfortable. That's one of the downsides to it is, since it's not in all countries yet, you have to fly to wherever you're going to be racing, and you have to book your travel costs, your airfare, your hotel, or Airbnb, whatever it is. Those costs will pile up. So at the moment, I'd say that Hyrox is still a bit expensive given that it's not everywhere yet. But I think that's changing because their goal is to be in every major country. So I'm guessing the Philippines is probably one of those. If you live in a country that has Hyrox, good for you. You don't have to worry about the travel costs. So in that sense, I would say that competing in Hyrox might be cheaper than a CrossFit competition, given that in CrossFit competition, your nutrition, those costs will add up and things like that. Now, some final notes about the sport of CrossFit and Hyrox. Something that we were talking about earlier, I was talking with Austin earlier. One major difference in Hyrox is you just have to register to join. Literally, you just have to pay. So, world record holder and the men's world champion currently is a guy named Hunter McIntyre. If you want to join and race against the elites in Hyrox, all you have to do is pay the registration fee and join the men's pro category or the women's pro category if you're a woman. And you'll be racing against the elite of the elite in that sport. Now, how you do versus those elite athletes is completely depends on how you train for it. But my point is just saying that you can register and race next to the elites. There's no barrier to entry as far as that's concerned. However, if you want to compete against Tia Toomey, Pat Vellner, Krenikov, the elite of the elite in the sport of fitness of CrossFit, that's not gonna happen. That's like saying you want to play ball with LeBron. It's pretty much gonna be that hard. You're not gonna be able to compete against them because the qualifying process to compete at the highest levels of the sport of CrossFit is just too prohibitive for the average Joe and plain Jane. Whereas for Hyrox, it's very inclusive, it's very accessible. I don't know if that's gonna change in the future. Maybe it will. Maybe they're gonna have I don't know if Hyrox sees this video. So, oh, he didn't think of that. I really don't know. I really don't know if how it's gonna change because Hyrox is such a new sport. I don't think I would do something like that, but I'm just saying, if you want to, okay, if you have some delusions of being an elite athlete right now, even if you've never done a Hyrox, you can register for your first Hyrox in the pro division. There's a pro division, there's an open division, there's a doubles division, or pairs division. There's even a relay division if you just want to really do it for fun. I mean, literally, if you join the relay division, you can train for 2 weeks and join the relay division. You'll be fine. Okay, it's that accessible. Whereas with CrossFit, like I said, it's very inaccessible, if that makes sense. You would have to train for, I would say, at least a year to join your very lowest boot camp division at a local competition where there are no high skill movements, but still the capacity you need to build and the toll it will take on your body is just too much. For Hyrox, for the average person, it's probably going to take you about 1 hour and 30 minutes to finish the race, an hour and a half. The elites, closer to 1 hour. If you're a newbie and you're not that fit, closer to 2 hours. But you know, you're done in about 2 hours. The event is done in 2 hours. In CrossFit, that's a day with multi-events, 3 events, and the toll that's gonna take on your body is just really different from my experience. After doing Hyrox, you can go shopping. In CrossFit, after you do CrossFit, you're looking for a physical therapist or a physio, as some people call it, to help you, you know, recover. There are those differences, and then as far as like say Olympic aspirations, I'd say that Hyrox having a set format, who knows, you know, sometime in the future it could be adopted as an Olympic sport. I don't know. Whereas I think that's something that CrossFit has working against it to become a standard accepted Olympic sport. Now, I don't even know if CrossFit wants to be an Olympic sport. I remember attending my level 1 in 2013 and Greg Glassman, lucky me, Greg Glassman walked in. Although he's not in charge of CrossFit as a company now, he was asked back then by someone if he saw the CrossFit Games as being part of an Olympic sport, and he simply answered something along the lines of he's not really an endpoint kind of person, and you know, he doesn't know where this is gonna go, but he'd be open to that. But that being said, just like bodybuilding, it's gonna be very hard because bodybuilding is very subjective, whereas you have CrossFit being very kind of random, and like I said, it depends on who's programming the competition. The events might favor a certain athlete or certain bias for that athlete. Let's say this event is biased for heavy barbell movements, that's gonna be biased to someone who lifts a lot of heavy weight. Whereas if the games are biased towards some heavy endurance work, it'll be biased towards some CrossFit athletes with probably an endurance sports background, things like that. So that being said, you know, I say the choice is completely up to you. Hyrox versus CrossFit. Hyrox being more accessible, CrossFit being a little bit more specialized in the type of training that you would require to compete in the sport. So let me know down in the comments below, are you interested in joining either Hyrox, CrossFit? Would you want me to compare Hyrox or CrossFit to another sport that you're thinking? Let us know down in the comments below, and we'll do our best to respond to your questions as soon as we can. That being said, if you've gotten this far, you may want to consider subscribing to our channel. You know, every subscription helps, and we will see you in the next one.